talk about.
It's quite poor. Hello, my name is Ian. This channel is all about music and art, and this is where we talk about music and art. And in this series of videos, we've been looking at what's been happening regarding music streaming in the UK. The UK government's Digital Culture, Media and Sports Committee have been looking into the ways that the streaming platforms and other large record companies manage payments to songwriters, musicians and performers. And on the 15th of October 2020, UK Parliament published a news article stating that the Digital Culture, Media and Sports Committee were going to inquire into the impact of the streaming on the future of the music industry. The article stated that the inquiry would consider whether the government should take action to protect the industry from piracy in the wake of steps taken by the EU on copyright and intellectual property rights. Now, I knew that there were some high-profile musicians and music industry types who were giving evidence to the committee. And the first of these meetings was on the 24th of November 2020, with another meeting on the 8th of December. And now these were long meetings lasting over 3 hours. So what I've done is I've decided to edit them down into shorter videos, and the links to all the previous meeting videos are in the description down below. The Digital Culture, Media and Sports Committee is now back in session, and they have 2 more meetings. We've just uploaded the meetings from January the 19th, 2021, and now we're going to cover the February the 4th meetings. And there is another meeting scheduled for the 10th of February, which will include when it's available. And it's worth providing a background to the witnesses giving evidence on this session from the 4th of February 2021. First, we have Yvette Griffiths, who is co-chief executive and executive director of Jazz Refresh. Her career has spanned both theatre, music, film and the management of major corporate events, companies and teams. This experience spans over 30 years, with most of it being in the senior management positions in the arts. We also have Pacifico, who is the Chief Executive of the Association of Independent Music, AIMS, which represents over 800 UK independent music companies, and he was previously CFO of the Featured Artists Coalition, FAC, a position that he held since January 2015. He was also president of the International Artists Organisation prior to joining FAC. Pacifico spent almost 10 years in the city in banking and strategy consultancy before leaving to focus on Specific Music in 2005. Specific Music is a creative music consultancy which designs and delivers bespoke music for industry clients as well as brands and charities. He also set up the All Star Collective, which is made up to 40 of the world's top session musicians. He continues to perform and record in his band Pacifico Blues. And lastly, we have Rupert Skellett, who is the General Counsel at Beggars Group. Rupert got the job when Martin Mills, the owner of Beggars, decided he wanted in-house person. Mills had already been doing the job for a couple of years, and essentially he was a natural choice and has been with Beggars for 20 years. All of the sessions for these committees were chaired by Julian Knight, and the complete list of committee members and the relevant links are in the description down below. This recording is made in agreement with the UK Parliament Terms and Conditions, which states I cannot alter the video and audio of the recording in any way. I can't use this material for satire or use it on a website or social media platform that promotes, encourages or facilitates illegal activity or encourages hatred and antisocial behaviour. So, here is part 3 from the session from the 4th of February 2021 into the economics of music streaming.
Giles, just to clarify, actually, Yvette, I think you were correct. We were given the impression by the record labels that they did routinely write off advances. It's probably quite a similar position as within publishing, where in which they hold the threat of recouping advances as a means by which to keep effectively the other side honest in the fact that they do what they say. It's a very similar position in publishing. Just on the sort of life of the effectively the sort of copyright, if you like, and who owns it. Is there any way in which is it a big benefit to the UK music industry that the record labels and own such an amazing back catalogue, and then therefore they're able then to leverage that and able then to bring that income forwards and develop new talent? Or does it sort of perhaps stem the pipeline a little bit? Maybe perhaps we all sort of end up listening to stuff from 30 years ago. I'm also talking from my own experience there. But Paul, you're smiling away. What's your sort of perception on that?
I think it's highly nuanced. I love the fact that you can listen to all music of all time at any point with anything right now. That's a phenomenal force for democratization and creates an amazing meritocracy and allows us to explore music in ways that wouldn't have been possible before. Of course, the downside is how new artists, incredible niche artists, cut through the noise to be heard. And I think, again, that comes back to one of Mr. Brennan's questions earlier about how we accelerate development and make sure those artists can make a living and reinvest in their careers to make them sustainable.
Thank you. John Nicholson.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. And thank you all for joining us. Many of the subjects that I wanted to cover have been very well covered hitherto. But I'd quite like to go back to basics, because the thing I think that struck all the members of this committee is just how miserable a lot of artists are. Can you hear me all right, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh, good. So many artists who've appeared before us just seem terribly unhappy. And we've all been contacted, I know I have been, by lots of artists who say how trapped they feel, and many are worried about money. They just really want to work, to enjoy their craft, and to earn enough to pay for their rent. What do you think, Rupert, that the industry can best do to improve the quality of musicians' lives?
Well, I think it's no coincidence that this is happening at the time it's happening, when the live music industry has basically been closed down. It is true to say that a lot of artists and songwriters have benefited hugely from the streaming economy. As I was saying earlier, that's principally catalogue artists and it's principally singles artists. But there is a category of artists who have not fared so well on streaming. And, some of our releases do brilliantly with streaming and some of our releases don't. And with those, we need to look at other revenue sources. We obviously need to look at live when it gets going again. We need to look at synchronization licenses, original commissions, physical records, obviously. Physical records are a massive play for us still, probably more so than they are for the majors. And it is a very important part of the story. And also I'd say that the streaming is a very long game. So I'd say to those artists, don't give up. If you grow your catalogue, if you keep playing live when you can, there is a chance that you will build an audience, and over time, you will build the streams higher and higher. And you will get into a point, hopefully, where your physical record sale receipts would be exceeded by what you get in streaming. It's a long game, so it's very hard because obviously artists, have bills to pay right now. So I have absolute sympathy with where they're coming from on this.
We were very struck, I think, by just how out of touch some of the big three were when they appeared before us. Well, maybe they were out of touch, or maybe they weren't. I wasn't entirely sure, but they had this idea that artists and bands were really incredibly happy and they had a wonderful relationship. And one artist wrote to me, and it was just wrote ha 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 with an exclamation mark. So is it true that this record company boss really think that his acts were all incredibly happy? I'm sure the big acts are happy, the ones who've got him in speed dial, but the ones that never speak to him, who've got really terrible contracts, they're not happy at all.
But I think I think the artists and songwriters who have done really well out of streaming haven't really been very vocal about that, to be fair. So, you know, I think it's difficult. It's really difficult because, you know, we have a lot of sympathy with artists because as I say, we do have artists who don't stream that well. And it's very difficult because the streaming units they get are in like the tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands, but that's just nowhere near enough. I mean, you just have to have a complete rethink of units. So, you know, you're looking at tens of millions. And we do see that, you know, we have, just looking at my notes, we have 41 artists who are streaming over 50 million streams a year. So there is a big category of artists who are happy. So the major label bosses weren't, you know, they weren't completely wrong.
Yvette, sorry, John. Paul Pacifico has been desperately trying to get in for about the last 2 or 3 minutes, so I'm just going to quickly get into a different contribution and then just put the next question.
Of course, Paul. Please,
if that's okay, I appreciate coming in on this because I think you've cut to the heart of the matter. You know, it's never been a better time to be in the music industry, and it's also never been a harder time to be in the music industry. And getting those artists, and to be completely honest, independent businesses to the scale that they can really work is a massive challenge. We have 90% of the revenue from streaming going to 1% of the people in the market. And this huge concentration of wealth causes, you know, quite a lot of issues. And I think, you know, this is about money in, money out, and great efficiency in the middle of those two things. You know, we have on the one side the consumer price, which hasn't changed since the launch of streaming over 10 years ago. That's still at $9.99. We still have the threat of piracy. Consumers still have the choice to pay or not to pay for music. That's a significant impact on the market. We still have the issue of safe harbors and quite the clarification of liability for some of the platforms that, again, you know, would the industry benefit from more money in? Yes, absolutely. Would artists benefit from more money out? Yes, absolutely. We'd like to see a combination of factors. We'd like to see continued support for anti-piracy. We'd like to see clarification and strengthened copyright. The UK is one of only 3 net exporters of music in the world. We'd love to see the UK become the world's centre of excellence for copyright and for content capture. And all of that revenue, all of those long-time copyrights administered through PPL and PRS and all of our other institutions here in the UK. And I think if we can add to that an accelerated maturity model where earlier stage and niche artists can get to scale, get a proper income stream from streaming, then I think we've really got a package to go with.
You've doubtless been watching some of the previous sessions that we've had, and we're coming towards the end of this. We've heard a lot of witnesses. I think we as members have got some quite clear ideas of what we think we should be recommending. And it's interesting. It's not a party political thing. It's the views that we hold seem to be across the members here and across the parties. But if you were asking us what you want to have included in our report, in particular to help the artists, because lots of people are doing well out of the music industry, but in particular to help the artists who are struggling, talented but struggling, what would you like us to include in this report?
When I reach out and talk to members like the Numbers label up in Glasgow or the Leaf label in Leeds, these are great examples of innovative entrepreneurs in music working in fantastic alignment in the long term with the artists they work with. And for me, it's those 3 core problems. It's capital, skills, scale. We need a tax break to help us attract investment. We need to make sure that we upskill and level the playing field. And we need to help artists and labels get to scale so that streaming can become a meaningful part of their revenue mix.
Yvette, can I ask you precisely that question? What would you like to see us include in our report?
I mean, I'm not sure my answer would be tremendously different to Paul's, to be honest with you.
Doesn't have to be.
They're three very key areas. I mean, in addition to that, I just kind of wanted to circle back around to, there needs to be some kind of modernization of how we process a lot of this. Before I recognize that streaming exists as a response to piracy. I completely recognize that, but introducing something like streaming has absolutely reduced the amount of income that artists can earn in this day and age. As Paul has mentioned, there is the $9.99 that's been the same for the last 10 years on the main platforms that we listen to, and that is never going to, unless you are in that higher echelon of billions of streams, that's never going to generate your rent for you. Do you know what I mean? So I really do think that there is something that needs to be done in terms of the modern landscape that we're in, and changing how we work so that it's fairer for all. Some people need to sit round a table.
But I don't think we've got to be careful, though, that the cure isn't worse than the disease.
Yes.
And I think we've got to be really careful to keep the value of music rights high, keep the commercial marketplace operating, and not allow ourselves to lose our rights in favour of a kind of mandated compensation through an outdated mechanism like equitable remuneration.
Rupert, final word to you before I hand back to the chair.
Yeah, I would go back to what I said before about advocating that the major labels had a minimum digital royalty rate and wiped unrecouped balances after a period of time.
Okay, thank you all. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Alex Davies-Jones.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the three of you for joining us this afternoon. You've all pretty much touched on this in your answers so far, but I'd be really keen to get your perspective, because Will Page, the former chief economist at Spotify, has argued that, and I'm quoting him now, for labels, the music industry is thriving, but artists have not received a proportional benefit. Now, how would you all answer this assertion? Paul, if I probably come to you first.
That feels like a quote that probably accurately describes the major label landscape more than it does our community. Many of our businesses are not at that kind of scale where they're on the receiving end of lots of passive revenues from massive catalogues. They work very hard for every stream they get alongside their artists and share the proceeds fairly.
Rupert, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at this the other day. Actually, I was looking at catalogue artists' royalty earnings now compared to 4 years ago, and in some cases they've doubled. So I think, I mean, I've said this before, but it is important to state that there are artists who are doing very well out of the streaming, and they are seeing the benefits.
Okay, and Yvette, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say, again, echoing Paul again, it feels like it's predominantly kind of the landscape of the majors where the majority of the challenges are going to be. That obviously there are substantial artists who are doing very, very well from streaming and from being an artist full stop. But then there are those who are stuck, whether it's in the middle ground or in the lower ends, where, perhaps the royalty splits are inequitable. Perhaps, that they may not have had the best deal, etc. Or they thought the deal was great at the time, and now actually, in hindsight, perhaps that isn't the case.
Well, that brings me on to my next question, because we've heard a lot actually about the lack of transparency on how deals are done and how the music is licensed. Is there any way for artists in your repertoire or their intermediaries to see the terms by which you license the music to the streaming services?
So, sorry, I'll just jump to I spoke last. So as Jazz Refresh, and I know many other the indies are the same, we work with distributors who are part of Merlin, who I think Paul mentioned earlier, who will negotiate lots of terms on our behalf with the streaming platforms. So all of that information is available for the artists to see. When we do our royalty statements, which we're trying to do quarterly currently, when we do our royalty statements to the artists, we break down all of the detail. These are the amounts of sales. They have a little spreadsheet with the amount of streams and what the value of that is as well. We try and provide as much transparency as possible with them, because it really is a partnership. It really is a partnership.
Rupert, is that the same for you? Is it open for artists to see?
We obviously can't show them deals between Merlin and platforms, and actually we're prevented by NDA clauses from showing our agreements, our licenses that we have direct to artists. But there's nothing hidden in them. I mean, if you're talking about a subscription streaming service, you will have an amount per month, and it'll be prorated according to your streams, and you'll split that revenue with your artists. There isn't any hidden kind of cleverness, or there isn't any special outside payments.
Okay, Paul, is it all open and transparent from AIM?
By and large, my experience of the members is that they are as transparent as they can possibly be. I think where in the past there have been complaints against independence, it's largely been because of out-of-date systems. But those systems are rapidly coming up to date, and I think the more people have access to royalty calculation platforms and these sorts of services, the easier that job becomes, even for the smallest independents. And actually, they save themselves a lot of headaches because their deals are pretty straightforward. I think when you've got a record contract that runs to 100 or 200 pages, it's going to be far more difficult to figure out what's what than if you've got a much more straightforward deal.
Yeah, okay. Paul, the BPI reported that last year's record labels' trade income was £1.1 billion, to which you contributed a significant portion. However, the BPI has called on the government to double the funding it puts into the Music Export Growth Scheme and to prime the capital market for music investment. Now, AIM is asking for tax incentives for its investors. Now, given the profitability of the record industry, why is it that your trade association is calling for increased taxpayer support here?
Independent music businesses suffer twice, I think, in the capital market. They suffer because it is a high-risk business. It's also a very complicated and misunderstood business. So when you talk to investors, they very rarely understand or are prepared to take risk in a business that they don't really get. I think so. Access to capital is not a sort of an evenly spread problem across the industry. Big corporations with big global parents have access to balance sheets that smaller companies just simply don't. And I think a tax incentive is a way of making sure that those smaller businesses, the innovators, the entrepreneurs, those British small businesses can actually make a go of it and grow their businesses without having to sell out to a major every single time.
Yeah, so support for British small businesses. So do you think the British government should then stop giving tax breaks and taxpayer support to those big, profitable, foreign-owned corporations wherever it can?
Well, listen, I think that, British music businesses and British artists have always punched above their weight in the global music economy. And I'd like to see that continue. We've said before, we're only one of 3 net exporters of music. As the streaming economy grows and the global music industry grows, with more and more people coming to market, more and more countries coming into that global market in a serious way, we need to make sure we don't take our place for granted. We need to work for what we get.
Yeah, Rupert, I saw you nodding heavily. Did you want to come in or add anything to that?
No, I just agree that the tax break should go towards British companies. I mean, yeah, evidently.
Yeah, and then Paul, so how does this benefit then the British economy if the government funding is benefiting shareholders abroad as the current model is?
Well, I'd like to think that money is directed to British businesses supporting British artists. That would be ideal, wouldn't it? I think we're there to try and help make sure that both commercially and culturally we express ourselves as a society, that we succeed in that, and that we spread hopefully a positive message.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I personally, and I think my constituents back in Pontypridd and constituents around the UK would rather that their taxpayers' money is going to support local British artists and independent British organisations rather than those big California companies on the East Coast in the sunshine. I
couldn't agree more. And I would say when we work in partnership with organisations like Wales Arts International, they're going to need more support than ever to make sure Welsh artists can be heard in the global economy, bearing in mind more complicated access, markets closer to home, should I say.
Yeah. And then finally from me, so by supporting British artists, wouldn't this have a greater impact on the economy? Who would have a greater marginal propensity to consume? And would this do so within the British economy than supporting those foreign-owned businesses? I feel like I'm just, making obvious claims here, but it's good to have your version of this.
Can I ask you just to repeat that again? Sorry.
Yeah. So would supporting British artists not have a greater impact on the economy? and who would have a greater marginal propensity to consume, and would doing so within the British economy be better than supporting those foreign-owned businesses?
I think you've answered your own question.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I think so.
Not to put words in your mouth, but it's just to get you on the record to confirm it.
No,
I think across. Sorry.
Go ahead, Paul.
Across the spectrum of different aspects of tax that comes from the music industry, whether that's through national insurance, whether that's through personal income tax, corporation tax, all the other taxes that are generated by British businesses investing in British artists with those rights being held in Britain.
Yeah. Thank you all. No more questions from me, Chair.
So thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video. All the best now. Cheers. Bye bye.